join me on the adventure here on the Mysterious Adventures Podcast. I am your host, Paladino Joey, or Joey Awajan. Mysterious Adventures is available on all of your favorite podcasting apps, and I thank each and every one of you once and always for downloading and listening to this show. It is a great pleasure to be back on board with you once again today, as we're going to get into a pretty interesting historical site in northern Louisiana called Poverty Point. Now, interestingly enough, Poverty Point has nothing to do with being poor. I'm not sure where the name came from when they talk about Poverty Point, but it's kind of like a combination of mounds. It's kind of like a city. It's like a trading spot. And what's really interesting about Poverty Point is this thing goes BC. That's right, before Christ. At least 1,000 years before Christ. So yeah, it's another one of those items that most of us wouldn't have thought about if not for this show or shows similar to this one. Wikipedia definitely will help with some of the information, the dates and such, and other various occurrences, along with, again, obviously various YouTube videos and such. But, you know, because you get the research and all that, and you get to see it in person, or you get to actually see it, like, you know, on YouTube. So that helps a lot. But this one's like a half circle, like a C. It's kind of got that Atlantis type design, but it's connected to rivers. Like the top of it's connected to the river, and then it goes in a C shape, and then the bottom part also connects to a river. So interesting design, again, kind of Atlantis-like, which again tells you, once again, it reeks of Nephilim era. This is because we're talking, when we get into the information, Poverty Point site contains earthen ridges and mounds built by indigenous people, but we'll see which indigenous people they're saying, between 1700 and 1100 BC. So we're talking almost 4,000 years ago, which, yeah. So it was during the late Archaic period in North America. Archaeologists have processed a variety of possible functions for the site, including as a settlement, a trading center, and or a ceremonial religious complex, which I think that's part of it. I think it's all three in a lot of ways, especially the last one, because it's another one of those deals where things connect to the stars and, you know, the solstice and all that. It seems to be a common denominator when you talk about Stonehenge, you talk about the pyramids. I mean, the pyramids connect to Orion, which is insane. The Great Pyramids, we talked about the Great Giza Pyramid and the other two next to it. Well, the Giza Pyramids, and then the big one in the middle, of course, which is like the main one that looks to be a massive power center. Again, we talked about that a few episodes back. Top episode so far in the history of Mysterious Adventures. But it seems to be the common denominator that everything seems to connect to the stars, which is what a lot of the Nephilim giants and fallen angels did. And the time period here seems to tie up with more with that versus Native Americans. And there's all kinds of debates on when the Native Americans got here. Some people say, you know, like maybe as far back as 2000 BC, which, you know, that's about 4,000 years ago. Other people say they got here around 1,700 years ago, around that period, like around a little bit before the Vikings or maybe slightly after, depending on when the Vikings got here. This, again, is 3,700 to 3,100, not 3,100,000, 3,100 years ago. Most recently. That's the most recent part of it. So further back than the Nazca lines, which again were kind of tied to that fallen angel, giant worship type of stuff. And this kind of reeks of a similar type of situation. Maybe it was indigenous people working with the fallen angels or Nephilim or something along those lines. So that could be the tie as well, if it was indigenous people and not potentially actual Nephilim giants building this big complex in northern Louisiana called Poverty Point. Poverty Point, the Poverty Point site anyway, has been designated a state historic site, U.S. National Monument, and yeah, it is a U.S. National Monument, and it makes sense. A U.S. National Historic Landmark and UNESCO World Heritage Site. This site is 15 and a half miles from the current flow of the Mississippi River, so about 25 kilometers, and is situated on the ridge of on the edge of Macon Ridge. Pardon me. The village of Epps developed in the historic period in West Coral Parish, Louisiana. Interesting stuff. It's 402 acres. Poverty, now operated as the Poverty Point State Historic Site, contains the largest and most complex late archaic earthwork, occupation, and ceremonial site yet found in North America. So yes, this is one of those ancient sites that's in North America. You got the pyramids in South America, which South America is just filled with interesting stuff like this that goes back way the heck, BC, including the Nazca lines. That's just part of it. But of course, the pyramids and such all over the place in South America. You could talk about Peru. You could talk about Brazil. You could talk about Chile. You could talk about way down at the bottom of South America, where the climate is actually probably colder than Minnesota because it's kind of close to it's kind of close to Antarctica. So, believe it or not, South America can get pretty cold in the southern part for the same reasons that Minnesota or or Canada can be chilly in the winter, because it's closer to the North Pole than it is the equator, maybe that type of thing. So interesting stuff, to say the least. I believe, what are we at? The 45-degree point. That's by Lake. I might be saying that incorrectly, but Medicine Lake. Says I'm not really here to talk about Medicine Lake right now, Minnesota. So my apologies there. Euro-Americans described the site in the 19th century. So they described it then. Since the 1950s, Poverty Point has been a focus of professional archaeological excavations, and understandable there. I can only imagine what may have been found. The earthworks are named after a 19th century plantation on the property. So Poverty Point, well, plantation and poverty. Let's leave that right where it is, and we don't need to continue on that part. What's really sad, though, and you just know it, you just know how these type of things work all the time. A lot of stuff that is excavated, which might have been Nephilim giant related, like giant bones maybe buried in mounds, like just all over the place, everywhere. Giants that are 11 feet tall, 10 feet tall, 8'2", 8'5", whatever, 7'5", which is still pretty big. It could be like a small Nephilim or Rephaim type of a giant, because they all have Canaanite origins, these giants. They have Canaanite origins, that's a fact. And are found all over North America. And where are they? It was just a weather balloon. There was nothing there. It's just Native Americans. What are you talking about? There was nothing there. It was just Native Americans. Yeah. What are you talking about? He's just 6'2". That's not a giant. Yeah, sure. Unfortunately, you're going to hear a lot of that everywhere you go, and that's the annoying part. But the fact that the complex is still there is always the most fascinating part of all when it comes to Poverty Point and so many other these. I don't know if there's you can't call it a megalith, maybe a monolith, that type of thing. Obviously, megalith, there's some of those massive structures that are found underneath the ocean that have probably been buried ever since the Great Flood, with civilizations possibly pre-Adamic, but certainly pre-Great Flood for sure, as things were definitely different in the past. Like, sea levels were 300 feet lower, which is pretty interesting. There was like the islands like around California that were, they're small islands today, but there was a much larger piece of land before that, but of course buried under the 300 extra feet of water. So it's pretty cool, pretty interesting, to say the least. And that's kind of how the Earth definitely changed. Apparently the site was authorized on Halloween in 1988. Cool year, at least in my opinion. So that's an interesting thing. Nearest city is Epps, Louisiana, like we just talked about. Coordinates 32 degrees. That's the coordinates, of course. 3812 north, 90 degrees, 2441 west. So kind of like playing Dragon Warrior 1 when you're trying to find Erdrick's token. Okay, sorry, I had to throw that in. The area is 910 acres, which is pretty big. So obviously it's sizable. It's not, it's not, it's not New Orleans or anything, but it's sizable. Governing body is Louisiana Office of State Parks. So that's another thing to be talking about with Poverty Point. Continuing on the structure of the site itself, The monumental earthworks of Poverty Point consists of a series of earthen ridges, earthen mounds, and a central plaza. Yep, there's a central plaza for sure. The earthworks core of the site measures about 345 acres, although archaeological investigations have shown that the total occupation area extended for more than 3 miles or 5 kilometers along the Bayou Mason. The earthworks include 6 concentric C-shaped ridges. Again, kind of like that, it's kind of like a half Atlantis. So Atlantis is believed to be a circular-shaped city in the past. So it's the same type of design, and it's like mounds. So again, it's a consistent thing, not by Native Americans, but by, again, Nephilim type of, Nephilim type people. I mean, it's Nephilim, doggone it. It is. Or, that's what it is. C-shaped ridges that extend to the edge of the Mason Ridge and several mounds outside and inside of the earthen ridges. These centric ridges are unique to Poverty Point. Yep. So again, the C-shaped type of deal. And like the map of it, you can say there's Mound B. That's kind of a smaller one that's further away than everything else. Mound A is massive. It's a bird mound, and God only knows what's buried there and what's been found there and what's been hidden from us, because 99% of a chance it has been. From a distance, it almost looks like it could be like like a stadium or something, like a baseball park. Like that's like the outfield, or I guess it could be behind home plate as well. But it's kind of like that in a way. If when you just kind of start thinking about sports, I suppose. There's Mound A, Mound B. Mound A is kind of like right behind the actual structure, like behind it, not on the inside of it. The actual, C-shaped, the 6 too. That's another interesting thing. Of course, it's 6. Like, why would that be the number? I'm telling you. So, yes, behind it is Mound A, the largest mound. It's called the Bird Mound. Mound B is one of the smaller ones, way back, kind of. It's in the back, but like further away, past a railroad track, or a ridge, I guess it is. Looks like a railroad track to me, but the Mound C is inside. It's called the Dunbar Mound. Mound D is Sarah's Mound. I'm not sure who Sarah is, but that one looks like it's part of the actual structure itself. Of course, the whole doggone thing is a bunch of little mounds, actually, again, which I don't know. It's very strange. And then the visitation center, that's like from, people from Louisiana, of course, they built that, and the archaeological dormitory. And then there's Mound E, the Ball Court Mound. Ball Court, maybe they're thinking the way I was, where it looks like a stadium or something. That one's also behind the whole structure, kind of close to Mound A. In fact, I would say it's the closest one to it, and it's the second largest of the 5 separate mounds that are not a part of the actual C shape. Notice I keep saying C. It kind of almost looks like the C in Chrono Trigger, if you ever played that game for the Super Nintendo. So it's pretty interesting. All kinds of stuff has been found, like lots of arrowheads and such, because, well, I wouldn't doubt there may have been battles there may have been battles. The Native Americans battled the giants many times historically. And again, obviously, you heard about the Lovelock Cave. I'll probably do an episode about that. That was approximately 4,000 years ago when all that took place. The red-haired giants in Lovelock Cave were battling the Native Americans, and the Native Americans set the place on fire and so on and so forth. And there's evidence that there was a fire inside that cave, a very large one. So, interesting. Very interesting. And they supposedly found the giants there, too. So, yes, then they still had red hair, and they were still well preserved, which is also very interesting. But, of course, you know how Smithsonians are. They come and take it, like you hear about on shows like Blurry Creatures and such. So continuing on that, all kinds of other structures, statues and such. The first aerial photo was taken in 1938, not 1838. It's a little too far back. A lot of people still believe that it was Native American built, but I'm not convinced it was. Not saying Native Americans aren't capable of this type of thing, but it wasn't. Was it really their thing though, or were they kind of more like nomads that kind of moved, like as a group? But did they build stuff like this? They did mounds. Yes, they had burial grounds, but this isn't really a burial ground. The large mounds may have been. In fact, they probably were, possibly with giants and Native Americans. Maybe the Native Americans used them after the giants in the future. So That's another possibility. Or who knows? I don't doubt that, again, that a lot of the giants were killed by Native Americans because they outnumbered them. The Native Americans did outnumber the giants, and of course the giants were not good guys to the Native Americans. So there was that. A conversation about the whole, where you hold up your hand and say how, like how. That's like a Native American thing. The reason why they're holding up their hand is showing that they have 4 fingers and a thumb, where a giant, a Nephilim, or Rephaim, would have 5 fingers and a thumb. That's why they want to. That's where they want to show you, like, show me your hand. Are you human? Are you a human? And if not, well, things are going to get very interesting around here really soon. That type of thing. See, because obviously the Nephilim were cannibals, and they would kill people to eat them, which is pretty nuts. But what do you expect? What do you expect, right? The Nephilim were basically almost like an animal, even though they had a intelligence as well. Of course they did, but at the same time, they were animal-like as well. They weren't, they weren't human, put it that way. They certainly weren't God's creation. They were fallen angels' creations, as you may know in Genesis 6, so and beyond, and also after that, as it says. This is where Poverty Point again. It's just, it just, with the more and more I stare at it, I keep coming to the conclusion it absolutely had to be Nephilim. It's just, unfortunately, again, they cover things up and they keep it. And of course, Native Americans, just like the Egyptians in a lot of ways, might kind of take over the place after the fallen angels. In the case of the Great Pyramids, they were long gone, like chained up and all that. And by the time the ancient Egyptians got there, it's like, oh, look at this. We can use this for whatever, be it burial or whatever else. But certainly not the original purpose of the Great Pyramids. And quite similar here with Poverty Point. Could have definitely been a trading center way back in the past, but also, again, probably a point of religious worship, which is what a lot of the archaeological things found that were Nephilim based. Possibly could be indigenous people worshiping either the Nephilim or the fallen angels, which is more likely the fallen angels. Those are the small g gods. Or, of course, something along the lines like it really was, Nephilim and fallen angels that were a part of the whole thing. So, more than likely, it could be a bit of both, to be quite honest. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all. Maybe it started one way and led to the next, and then eventually, eventually I could imagine the Native Americans killing them off at the end of the day, and then possibly buried them in those big mounds. Quite possible. There were sites found. Maybe if someday, if I can get the host for Giants of America, he's on Instagram and other social media. Was a guest in the early days of Blurry Creatures. Absolutely fantastic. Talked about 8'5" or 8'2" giant buried in a mound around a bunch of small people, like little people as well, that were buried there. Tiny little people buried with him, which again, probably again, like that's Native Americans wiping those people out because they weren't good. The giants weren't good, and maybe those little, people were worshiping the giant, and they had some kind of gold copper idol. So this is all kind of relative to me at the end of the day, and it's also extremely fascinating because what did we grow up with, be it the church or whatever? And obviously, I am a very strong church-going, born-again Christian. But it is a kind of a bummer. You don't hear about any of this kind of stuff happening. They don't really talk about it very much in the churches, and they absolutely don't talk about it in the history books either. They might talk about some false religion, like, yay, that's such a good thing. But they might talk about, like, tree spirits or something. That's great, thanks for nothing. But they'll, and if there is a tree spirit, it's probably not of God, right? Yeah. So, but they won't get into like some of this actual history that actually happened on the soil here in North America, which is a heck of a lot more going on. A famous line was said that the history of our earth is far different than we could imagine. It's a famous line, and it continues at the end of the day. This might be a part 2 type of thing when it comes to Poverty Point. it's like you just want to keep digging deeper and deeper into it, and you just wish there was more stuff found there other than just the structure itself. That's the unfortunate part, because they don't talk about it, and you just know that it was hidden. Apparently there are post holes as well, which that's something I'm seeing right now that also is related to post holes that were kind of like a Stonehenge type of thing, again, which tells you, again, Stonehenge is also in, I mean, obviously the original Stonehenge that we all talk about is in England, and then you have a Stonehenge in the United States of America, or in North America, and Stonehenge type structures all over the world. And to me, this is yet another one of those type of structures that is more, again, worshiping these small g gods, these fallen angels that basically came here as a godlike thing, and unfortunately the people worship them and joined a religion, be it Ra, be it whoever. Well, not Apollyon, he's chained underneath there right now. He was one of the big watchers, I do believe, in the past, that'll be released later on during the apocalypse, so watch out for that, of course. But would like to believe that someday all of this is going to be revealed, that we're going to find out what it all really was and what it was all about. And yeah, unfortunately it probably wasn't for anything good. It is a cool structure, it's interesting, but unfortunately, again, the purpose of it, just like the Nazca lines, probably not a godly thing. Probably more of a false worship and such of false gods, being small g gods, of course, fallen angels and such. So that's kind of an ongoing thing when it comes to Poverty Point and so many other structures that we're going to get into more and more as we get into Mysterious Adventures. I would like to get more interaction from people, though, because I know you're listening, but people aren't interacting. That's the unfortunate part. Another topic, I keep debating if I'd like to release it on here. I ended up re-releasing it on Freedom of Thought, where I talked about the whole O.J. Simpson case, where there was a very different scenario brought up by a extremely, extremely established and extremely good, well, just elite private eye. That is now a much older man, of course, in his 80s now. But he had already been insanely established at the time of the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman on June 12, 1994, where he brought up a different scenario where, yes, OJ's involved, but he wasn't the actual killer. He's involved because he's covering up for someone else, someone very, 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 very close to him. It's a fascinating episode. And, of course, again, I referenced to that private eye named Bill Deere or William Deere several times. He wrote a couple of books over the course of time. He even did a YouTube many years later, which is great, absolutely fantastic, where you hear all about the information. And I talked about it extensively on that Freedom of Thought. I did a reloaded episode for the 31st anniversary of those murders, where you could hear a different scenario. And I'm wondering if you'd like me to release it here or if you'd like to listen to it on Freedom of Thought. But it's up to you. Maybe if somebody wants to comment. Otherwise, Freedom of Thought is out there. Do check it out there. Otherwise, I can re-release it here to possibly reach a different audience as well. Because sometimes I swear that Freedom of Thought being a political show, it doesn't necessarily reach, like the audience really isn't maximized, which is unfortunate. So it's like, I'd like people to hear this story. And it's not about, it's, same old OJ talk again, da-da-da-da-da. There's a lot more to it. And I'd like to believe that it's a story worth listening to and a scenario worth considering, to say the least. As I tell you, try not to choke to death. My apologies there. But I'll probably do some more digging into this, put some more pieces together, maybe do another episode on this in the future. Like, I'll call it something along the likes of Poverty Point revisited, that type of thing, or maybe somehow, some way, I will actually visit the site and maybe do a video there, and wouldn't that be nice? And then do a more extensive podcast. That'd be pretty cool. If somehow, some way, I could actually get off my butt and visit some locations as well in the future. That would really add to the show. Other than looking at what I believe could be mountains locally here, which I think mounds are all over the place. People just don't realize it. They're right in your backyard sometimes. And that conversation is out there. It really is. Well, with all of that said, thank you so much for listening. And we're going to come back and continue conversations, have some more adventures to talk about. And I'd like to have some guests, probably have some longer episodes with some more details to get to, and bring you hopefully a better and better product as we continue to move forward. With that said, thank you so much for listening. Again, there's the ways to contact me, of course, at Mysterious Adventures at Mysterious Adventures 79 on X, if I'm saying that correctly. Oh, this girl upstairs doesn't know how to walk quietly. My apologies for that. On Twitter, it's actually at myadventure79. My apologies, because I know everything else, like Instagram and Threads, Facebook and everything else, not Mysterious Adventures 79, Mysterious Adventures 79 on everything else out there. I believe just Facebook, just simply look up Mysterious Adventures and hopefully you'll see the logo, because unfortunately that one, otherwise the link is in the show description to make it less complicated, so you don't have to dig and get frustrated. It'd be greatly appreciated there. If you were to follow those and contact me, let's get in touch somehow. PaladinoLive@yahoo.com or PaladinoLive@gmail.com are both welcome ways to contact. You can also do a audio submission if you'd like on there, an audio submission, like a recording like this kind of, and then send it to me, where it'd be like a phone call, but like kind of like a voicemail type of thing, and we can comment on that. Otherwise, let's do a show together sometime if you have some stories to tell. That'd be pretty cool. It could be paranormal, it could be stuff you've seen, like conversations like this. What a dream it would be to have an L.A. Marzulli type of a guest. Wouldn't that be amazing? Nate or Luke from Blurry Creatures, that'd be pretty cool. One of the guys like Scott or John from Bible Mysteries. Maybe even Jim Hammond someday from that'd be really cool, from the Final Hour podcast. We could have an extensive conversation on the Nephilim, I'm sure, there as well. So with all of that said, thank you again so much. Please put a 5-star rating if you could on the show via Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other app that allows you to do so. Click like on the YouTube, of course, that's out there as well. YouTube, Mysterious Adventure 79. So all the links are in the show description. I'll stop going on and on and on about that. Otherwise, thank you again so much for listening, and we'll be back for the next adventure.